Hey everyone, it's Andrew Brown, and welcome to the Cloud Resume Challenge Cloud Week, which is our real week of development. Wondering how everyone has been making out thus far. I'd love to know, has anyone completed generally the rough draft of their front end and back end? Do some people just have the front end done? Do some have the back end done? Looking forward in the comments to see where people are at. It's going to help me know whether we need to add more content, give you more time, or things like that. Before we jump into it, I was just talking to Bako about New Year's and what to make for New Year's, as I might make some hamburger steaks. Has anyone heard of these before? Uh, uh, Also known as hamburg steaks, or in Japanese, hamburgu, or Bako. What's the one called in Greek? Beef steakia. So beef steakia. It seems like everybody has their own version of this thing. And I don't know how to really segue this or relate it to different cloud service providers, but we'll say maybe cloud service providers are like hamburg steak. Everybody has their own, but they're a little bit different. Um, More so here. Just taking a look here. Dan Phillips saying, I do not like React. Neither do I, but I definitely utilize it there. In fact, we actually use our own custom JavaScript framework called Dilithium. As when these modern frameworks started to come out, they're really engineered for like, obviously React was made for Facebook, but for us mortal folks here, it's overkill and the architecture just does not make any sense. But it became very popular because Meta drove it. But anyone else using? Everyone using React, or anybody using anything but React? Right. So it says Andrew wants us to still have some cash for Christmas gifts. That's true. Hopefully everybody did their Black Friday Christmas buying. It's always the best time. Open face sandwich. Yep. That'd be good with this for sure. But backend is still locked, right? It shouldn't be. Is it locked, Bako? The backend? Oh, it is. Okay. I guess that kind of makes sense because the backend is part of the infrastructure architecture. So I guess I thought it was separate for some reason. I thought we had developed in an isolate, but I think it's just I make too many courses and I kind of forget what I'm doing. But anyway, hamburg steak aside, we're going to be looking at the architectural diagram. So I've created the 3 diagrams. If you've watched the office hours, you can see me making this in real time if you want to, with the exception of GCP. And we lazily have our GCP one here. And it was really hard to really expand more stuff. Maybe we'll fix that up as we go. Hey, Ramsey, how you doing? Did everyone finish the resume part? Yeah, I don't know. Well, I guess we're going to find out with submissions. By the way, submissions will open after this live stream, and I should have a recording to show you how to do submissions. It's not complicated, folks. It won't be that stressful. And, I expect our numbers to be a little bit low today because for those who know, it's reInvent. reInvents, people are already traveling for that. So I'm going to assume there's going to be lots of people catching up. So those that went to reInvent, hey, how are you doing? And looking forward to see your submissions soon when you get back, okay? But anyway, so we have our 3 diagrams, and that's something we'll walk through. But before we do that, for those that don't understand the differences between the 3 major cloud service providers, I figured it'd be fun, a bit tongue-in-cheek, to go through their differences. And for those that are experts in these respective ones, because we do have people here that know their stuff in different ones. If you disagree or agree, or you have an extra take, please put it in the comments. I'd love to read them. But let's go take a look and compare the 3 cloud service providers. Bako, what's your favorite cloud service provider? Azure, really? Okay, Bako says his favorite provider is Azure. I guess AWS is my go-to. I do like GCP, but I'd like to know what everyone's favorite provider is, and we're going to pull up some screenshots. And if you're wondering why there's a race car here, again, this is just so Bako's paying attention. Bako likes F1 racing, and it just makes sure that he is also watching the live stream here with us. Oh, and by the way, I guess I'm not sharing my screen. Let me go bring that up here. There we go. And I'm going to get my head out of the way. And so here we'll see AWS. And so for some reason, every cloud service provider sponsors F1 racing. Now, Bako, do they all have their own vehicle, or? Okay, no, but I mean, like, cloud service providers, does every single one have their own? And so I'm putting Baker on the spot. He's not really answering me too well. But as far as I was able to tell, it looks like either these cloud service providers sponsored an entire vehicle, or they just have their name slapped on there with other ones here. I don't know much about F1 racing. If there's any fans here who'd like to know, but we're getting across the board of all these things. Yeah, having no cloud service provide. If you have no preference, that means you hate them all. But yeah, I'm pretty sure behind what is the window for accepting submissions and grading, there's a lot of wiggle room, as we keep repeating here, for submissions, because we know there's conferences like reInvent, and it's the end of year and we got holidays. You got to the end of the year. I don't know if I can extend it beyond January 1st. I don't want to make that promise, but we'll see here. Lots of Azure fans, which is great. I'm still late to purchase. Am I still late to purchase the grading? I don't think so. Bako, people can still buy grading. Okay, yeah, and yeah. So he's saying you can for now. I don't know when that gets turned off. We know at some point there is a turn-off point, because sometimes stragglers just don't benefit from coming in too late. But right now you can purchase. So yeah, just looking through the comments here. But let's go through and compare these, and we'll get people's thoughts here. Okay, so let's talk about AWS first. So I like to describe AWS as Lego architecture. In fact, AWS likes to describe themselves as Lego architecture. And if you know the Lego company, they actually have a lot of tech behind them, and they use AWS as a main provider. So when you go to the conferences, you'll literally see Lego and Lego kits. And so for whatever reason, AWS likes to engineer their stuff as tightly scoped modular services. So what that means is that, a cloud, like a bucket storage service, is a bucket storage service. A block storage service is a block storage service. VM is a VM. Now, that's not to say they don't have umbrella services where something does more than one thing, but generally things are very isolated in scope. Some services overlap what they can do, but it really does feel like you're playing with Legos. And this also affects their marketing. So when AWS markets their products, they market it from a service to service perspective, not solving you a solution, but solving a specific technical component, right? And this has been good or bad for AWS, depending on the way you look at it. They had the market lead for such a long time. But I would say that sometimes people did not know what they could do with these things, because AWS's attitude is like, we'll give you the Legos, you go figure out to do it, which is not the same kind of approach as other providers in terms of trying to sell you a product. I think they've changed in more recent years to kind of adopt an Azure's approach of solution selling. But for the most part, they've always had this Lego approach. In terms of when they're releasing new stuff, I always find they have short preview windows. So they might develop something for a year or so. And then when something comes out into preview, it doesn't stay in preview for very long. It might be 3 months or whatever. And it's mostly just initially to get customers on to these products and see if they are a good fit, so to speak, for customers. But generally, most previews go into production. I rarely have seen many previews that have been pulled. The only F1 is the one I need help with. Okay, I'm assuming we're talking about the F1 key on the keyboard here. When is deadline submissions? Do they need to be part of the resume, front end, back end, or choose the cloud? So in terms of submissions, generally, this Saturday, you want to be submitting your front end. If you can't, you can submit late. I might factor in the timing of when you submit for final grading, but just submit the best you can. And again, I'm telling you right now, I know people are going to be late for this because of all the things that are going on. But generally, if we were at a period of time and there weren't conferences or year end, I would factor in the timing of submission for your final grading if you were to get a higher grade for that kind of stuff there. Are AWS docs better than the other ones, right? We'll talk about that in just a moment. But you are pretty much on the nose there. So AWS is, I would call it startup first, cloud first, Linux driven. When I say startup first, the adopters here were people that were building a product for the first time, and it wasn't on premise or anywhere else. It would start it in the cloud. Maybe it would start with a virtual private server, like let's say, what's that really popular one that's green, Linode, however it was, and then they would move over to AWS, or they'd start on Heroku and then move over to AWS. And it's always been cloud first, right? So same thing. It's like you're a startup, and that's where you build first. I would say it's always been more Linux driven. They actually do have very good Windows offerings in terms of like start time and things like that. But to be fair, they're not going to have the same levels of integrations and things like that Microsoft is going to have. And so I would probably say that it's more Linux driven than Windows driven. One thing that's always been really good about AWS is the fact that they've been slow to sunset their services, and they generally have given long headway when services are to sunset. Sunset means to get rid of a service. And only until like I think this last year we started to see service, or was it last year? I can't remember. We started to see some services go. This is mostly because AWS was mass firing, and also there was a change of leadership. And so as there was a change of leadership along with mass firings or layoffs, a lot of the folks that were maintaining these things weren't there anymore. And so AWS cuts up a bunch of the developer tool services. In fact, they actually brought back one code commit, which was very surprising. I think I have a blog post about how I said AWS should not cut these services; they're essential. But turns out they were, and so at least code commit has been come back. But generally, because historically AWS has always been very good about not getting rid of their services and giving you a lot of headway and stuff like that, we've trusted that we could live and have our workloads longer. But that shakeup last year has been a bit of concern. Maybe AWS has been turning around and trying to reestablish trust with their customers. I wouldn't say that customers don't trust AWS as much as other providers. They definitely trust AWS, but we've seen some changes in AWS. As Ramsey was saying earlier, the docs are really, really good. In fact, the docs generally match the services. That doesn't mean to say there aren't gaps in services. If you were to dig through the API and go through all the stuff, you will find gaps. You'll find things that are just not documented. But for the most part, their documents aren't overly bloated. You generally can do what you want. They're not always solution driven. So it doesn't feel like the docs are always written by somebody that's trying to build something. But for the most part, you can build the stuff that you are looking for and that you need. Rest in peace, Cloud9. I wish they'd bring that one back, but they'd have to do a good job with it. That one was a hard one on me because I had a lot of videos in that one. And also Gitpod was a hard one on me for as well, because after I did Cloud9, I used Gitpod, and now we got to use Codespaces. We're in the GitHub ecosystem for that one. It's okay. That, or I could just make videos locally, but we don't do that. So another thing is, I would say, like, if you describe AWS when they're launching new products, I call them like lazy launches, because I always feel that their services don't have enough in them to really meet the demands of customers. And this has always been a bit of an issue where they want to release a minimal viable product. AWS thinks of themselves as a collection of startups. The only problem is that because they're such a large organization and so many people are seeing a product when it comes out, that they become kind of gridlocked. If they don't get the amount of adoption they want for a service, that service is not going to improve very much. Or that the thing that they launch as an MVP, it'll be too hard for them to re-architecture to make it the way that it should be to really meet the demands. And that, again, that's why we saw some pain with developer tools and they went away, or they've never been very well developed, where AWS has a service like Code Build and Code Pipeline, and they're generally good, except there's some parts where they just don't, you can't communicate to other parts of it. And then some integrations are better than GitHub Actions. And so GitHub Actions is kind of taken over. That's why if we were to do the automation stuff, I probably wouldn't have used GitHub, Git Codespaces, and Git Code Pipeline, because even AWS has kind of relinquished those tools to say, GitHub Actions is better. Not to say that AWS doesn't use third-party services. So like, if you've ever gone to the main AWS website, the marketing site, before you log in, they don't use AWS CloudFront to serve that website. They use Fastly, which is interesting. So, AWS is always going to use the best in class for their business, but generally not always their services are the best in class for them, right? And not for you. So you have to make that decision for you, for yourself. Depends how you feel about the AWS UI. They keep changing it, but I always like to think that the UI is dumb, which I think is a good thing, because it's always been very fast loading and very consistent. People that live in Azure, you have to have a lot of confidence to work in Azure, because that UI is very inconsistent in terms of telling you when things are the way they actually are. So I'd say AWS has the best UI, at least from a perspective of having confidence and working with it. AWS has been the leader market for a very long time because they've had a very long head start. And just the way that they built their products and had their customer support and et cetera is very, very good. and I kind of glanced over this one, but they do. I would say they have the best customer support. Folks in the audience, do you agree AWS has the best customer support, or would you say that it's more or less the same across the board? For those that spend a lot of time with tickets, please let me know. How can we describe AWS if we describe this as a persona? I would probably say AWS actually describes themselves as this. They say, we are a collection of 100 startups under a single company. And the reason they say that is to try to tell you that AWS is it's like, oh, we're like fast and we iterate fast, but we have the budget of a big company. But in reality, it's more like AWS has the the scrappiness of a startup. Like things are um what's the word? It's like they don't get the budget from the company, so they're scrappy like a small startup, and then they have the lack of agility like a large company. So that's kind of how I feel these days. But again, AWS has really great core services. It is obviously market leader still. So despite me tongue in cheek saying these negative things about it, it's still really really good. That's just kind of the thing there, and just again seeing how people feel about that description of AWS. But that's how I feel about it. And so hopefully that gives newcomers here an idea of what it is that you're looking at with AWS. Let's talk about Azure or Azure. Notice that I say it two different ways because there is no right way to say it. I learned this when I was talking to my fellows over in the UK, as I noticed they were saying Azure, and then over here in North America, we're saying Azure. And so there's no wrong way to say it, but I like to flip between the two, obviously. So I would describe Microsoft Azure as a solution selling approach, meaning imagine that, there's a company and they want to adopt a cloud service provider, and Microsoft has their salesperson in the room. The way that they try to sell you on their thing is they go, every service, like if the company's like, we need X, Y, Z, A, B, C, the salesperson at Microsoft's going to say yes, and it does that. And then they're going to go back to the development team and say, hey, to get this client on board, we have to adopt all this stuff. And whether or not that makes the service bloated or an umbrella service or hard or confusing to navigate with multiple SKUs, that's what they're going to build out to close that sale. You could say that Azure is very aggressive with getting customers, which is not a bad thing. It's just their approach to it. They have a rapid iteration cycle, like to the point that I think it's at the expense of long-term support or customers. So it's not uncommon to see like an API, like 7 versions of an API, and it's only been like 2 years, and there's one version that's still in use, and there's another version that's still in use, and they don't necessarily do the same thing. But the point is that Microsoft Azure is very aggressive with being very innovative. So whereas AWS says they're innovative, I think Azure is the most innovative and the most one pushing their stuff pretty good. The Azure CLI is very, very good. I would definitely agree with that. Just logging into it is super simple. And I don't think I put this in here, but I would say that Azure does the best for being identity first, meaning that it's very easy to connect to Azure and start utilizing it, especially via the CLI. Whereas AWS, that was kind of an afterthought. But to be fair, Azure does have that product. Oh my goodness, Active Directory. So they're definitely first class when it comes to identity and things like that. I would kind of describe Azure more as hybrid first or Windows driven, because they had this large customer base that had already been running on-premise environments or workloads. And, people, thought that, Azure was not really taking off. But to me, I knew like there was that large base, and in one day they were going to tap into it. And there was no surprise to me that Azure became second and could potentially become first if they keep pushing the way that they're pushing. Entra ID now. Yeah, it's called Entra ID now. But I'm going to still call it Microsoft Azure Active Directory, as I don't care for that new name. So, when you are like, the way Azure works makes sense for the type of people that they are building this for, because, if you are coming into cloud for the first time and you've never used AWS, Azure, or GCP, you might find Azure very, very hard because, it was really built around the Windows, system administrators that, ran the on-premise environments, and they're very comfortable working the way that Azure is built. Azure has a lot of documentation. I would say they have more documentation than AWS, but I would say that there's a lot of junk in there. There's a lot of product marketing there to explain and do solution selling to have you adopt that product to the point that it can be very confusing. And despite them having so much documentation, unfortunately, most of the time, it does not match implementation. So you cannot trust the docs. If you are going to try to learn Azure by just reading the docs and then passing the exam, you're going to find that you're going to have a really bad time, as a lot of times things just don't match up. I'll give you a very good example. In Azure, we have Azure Functions, and Azure Functions is a way of running function as a service. So basically, you take a piece of code, and they take care of the rest for you. And obviously, with Azure Functions or any other kind of function as a service, you can choose a predetermined runtime: Ruby, JavaScript, Java, .NET, whatever. But if you want to have a custom runtime, you should be able to do that on Azure, just like you can do with AWS with containers. Same thing with GCP. I tried implementing this because in the Azure Developer AZ2020, was it 204, it's a thing that you're supposed to learn to pass the exam, right? And so you think, okay, this shouldn't be too hard to do. I go to the docs is incorrect, it doesn't work. I go try to implement it 3 different ways, that doesn't work. I go to support, ask them, they don't know how to do it. I go to the team that built it, and they can't even show me how it works. Yet it's a question on the exam. And so this is where reality, like the ideal thing that they want you to use, does not match reality. And so I would never recommend to anybody to use the runtime. In fact, for Azure Functions, the only way that I can utilize it is through the Visual Studio Code, or maybe through Terraform. And you're going to find, as we go through the Azure section, I try to do it a few different ways, but then I just choose a very prescriptive way that doesn't use Azure Bicep, doesn't have IAC, because sometimes with Azure, if you find something works a certain way, you stick to that way because, we'll talk about that in a second here. But again, Azure is very product market driven, and they have a lot of services and features. They love renaming their services, right? If a service isn't, catching on, they'll rename it. So AWS does rename services, but not as much as Azure does. GCP, I can't really think of any time they've renamed anything, right? Has GCP ever renamed a service? I can't even think of it. But the one nice thing about Azure services is often they are named what they are, whereas AWS has very esoteric names. Azure generally name the services what they are. But yeah, so as I said, that Azure has many approaches to a service, like that you could implement it, but generally they'll only work one way. So this is an issue with their UI. So they have a really, really great UI. It's very normalized. It allows you to have rich data and things like that. And there's many ways that you can look at information. But often, this complexity and robustness comes with the drawback of being slow or inconsistent. So like, let's say you update a server. You might think that what it shows you right now is the current state of the server, but you might have to wait a few minutes, right? And you have to monitor notifications. Even notifications that tell you what's occurring don't even tell you stuff. So there can be a lot of lack of confidence of what is currently happening. I do believe that you might get better data if you pull the APIs directly. So that might be less of an issue, but there's that problem. I kind of skipped over this one, but Azure likes to put things in previews, and they like to get customers in front of them. The only problem with their preview services is that Azure will get a sales team together. I can't remember what they're called. Sales engineers. What are they called at Azure, Bako? You know what I'm talking about? No, he's saying account manager. It's like a solution architect. They have a special name for people that go out and they're basically solution architects, but they go out and they do sales engineering. And they will sales engineer on a preview service. And then the company will adopt it. And then Azure will say, we're not going to launch the service. So, building on preview services is a really bad idea on Azure. Whereas AWS is very unlikely they'll pull that service out. Generally, preview just means like they want to work out the kinks, they're going to launch it. But Azure, they could pull the rug on you. But you might think that because they invested so much time and money and effort with you to bring this product here, they might still cut that service. So don't build your house on, it's like building on a swamp. Don't build it on Azure preview services, okay? Forward deployed engineer. I don't know the name. I used to know. So meet Azure blah, formerly Azure Blip. Now it's 37% more cloud. Pretty much. Does Amazon Q help you through the docs? I don't know. It's okay. Like it's not, I should say that it's better than GCP. So GCP has what's theirs called? Google Gemini. I don't know what their system is called. Google Gemini Assist, and it will literally give you recommendations of AWS because their docs are so limited. That's how bad the Google Docs are. Yeah, vendor lock-in. Yep. Anyway, so we'll continue on here. So yeah, but I love their UI. I think they have the best UI. I just wish the consistency was there, but it's just not there, folks. So I would just say like, that, Azure just moves fast. And that's the fact of the point that they move so fast and launch services, they'll launch things without docs. They'll launch things without UIs. They'll launch things without it being fully in Azure Bicep or like in ARM or whatever. And so they just really, really move fast. So you just got to be careful when building on Azure, what you utilize and stuff like that. Or, if you have a lot of employees and they can keep on top of it, then it's not a big deal, right? So I don't know. Principal architect, no, that's not it. It's folks, you can keep guessing. I can't remember what it is, but I know it's not those. Azure was to bring. Oh, I got a spelling mistake. Azure wants to bring their large on-premise Windows clientele to the cloud. They want to do that. But I would say one thing is that Microsoft is using the old Microsoft playbook. My family business, my mom that built was a computer repair store up in Thunder Bay. And we had so much business because of Microsoft Windows. The reason why was that Microsoft Windows, they would launch something. It wasn't ready to be launched. It had everything under the sun that made customers happy, just whether it created complexity or whatever. But it wasn't a big deal because all they had to do was get people to buy in. And then if it was broken or the customers didn't understand something, you just sell them customer support and training. So thank you, Microsoft, for feeding my family for many years, despite it being a weird product. But the approach is still here. Again, it's not a bad thing. It's just how they work. Let's take it. Oh, we didn't even look at the vehicle. And so here, for whatever reason, I believe like beyond, what's the BWT stands? Beyond the track or something. But anyway, this is the Microsoft vehicle where it's pink and blue. And I believe that they really put all the money in here into that one. And I don't know if this is even on the track anymore, but you can see GCP really has their own nice looking one here. Let's talk about GCP. So I would describe GCP as research lab architecture. Okay. If you don't know, GCP has a lot of very academic and very smart people there. However, I would say that materializes as things being a little bit too complex for us regular architectures or developers. And so you could say that they're deeply engineered, some of their services. I would say that some of them are over-engineered, and sometimes they don't even make sense to normal people. They make sense to GCP. A good example of this is the networking firewall rules. So if you've used AWS and Azure, they have a concept of security groups, network security groups, and they feel kind of the same and how they wrap around stuff. Whereas GCP has network firewall rules, and they are like a centralized way of dealing with networking. And it's just completely different and very confusing. And every time I got to use GCP, I want to pull my hair out. But to be fair, if you started on GCP and you're used to it, you probably think all the other ones look really bizarre. And this comes back to understanding that if you learn one cloud, you do not learn them all because, again, they have a different approach to how they're building these services. I would say that because of this stuff, that GCP feels very opinionated. But the other thing is that their services are more minimalistic. More services does not necessarily mean a better cloud service provider. GCP has the fewest, but they're also very straightforward. They have fewer knobs, but the knobs generally work unless they don't document the knobs. Then that's where we run into an issue. I would describe GCP as AI first, ML first, data first, container native. Kubernetes, the thing Kubernetes, they created that. What was it called before? Borg. I think it went through 2 iterations, but Borg and Swarm, maybe Swarm. That name comes to mind. And they're SRE driven. Have you ever heard the term SRE? Was it Site Reliability Engineer? Is that what the S stands for? Site? That doesn't sound right. Site Reliability Engineer. Anyway, they got the white paper. They defined that term. And so, almost in a sense, GCP likes to be the masters of DevOps, so to speak. And obviously, they've always had a really good foot in open source. AWS has had a foot in open source. Microsoft has, but unfortunately, Microsoft has been a bit evil. There's a term. Do people know what I'm talking? Oh, site reliable engineer. That's what it is. But there's like, what's it called? The Microsoft playbook, Microsoft open source playbook. Have people heard of this? It's like extinguish. It's like extend, extinguish, extinguish. I can't spell. I'm trying to find it here. Here it is. Has anyone ever heard of this? Embrace, extend, extinguish, EEE. And this was made by Microsoft. Basically, it was to take over open source products, extend them. So like, oh, we're going to use this thing. We love this open source thing. We're going to extend with our own stuff. So now it has proprietary parts, and now you're locked into this thing. Oh, we're going to get rid of it now. And that's like literally part of Microsoft playbook. So we wouldn't say that Microsoft is open source friendly, but GCP has created extremely wonderful things and contributed extremely wonderful architectures and white papers and things like that. When we talk about modern Gen AI, the white paper on what's the thing called for the Gen AI thing? Can't remember. Pay attention, or the attention algorithm that came from Google. So Google's done lots of great work, but there's not everything's good at Google. Google's obviously not being non-evil anymore, if you know what I mean. GCP has terrible documentation. They do not care about documenting stuff. They get it to work. Their engineers know how they work. Maybe they got internal documentation, but things are just really poorly documented. However, if you pay for Google Skill Boost, they have lots of labs that have documentation in them, and those are good. But it's a pain to navigate. Yeah, that's what it's called. Attention is all you need. I have an old Microsoft t-shirt when they launched their first Linux research lab that says, "Snowballs seen in hell." Though, you know what would be a cool shirt to have is that extend, embrace, extinguish shirt. Maybe I'll make a hustle and I'll just have like a black shirt with those 5 white texts there. You know, all those hustlers where they just have white t-shirts and plain black text, trying to make their online hustle business. Maybe I could do it too. Products often feel built for internal Google engineers, not for customers. Has anyone played, was it Fallout 4? Fallout 4? So we can think of like Fallout 4. What are they called that live? It's the scientists that live underground. What are they called? The Institute. Okay, so I always think of, whenever I think of Google, I always think of the Institute, where it's a society, like imagine it's post-apocalyptic, can't say that word, but they dug all the way in the ground and they've engineered their own society and they're just doing their own thing. That's what I feel like Google is, okay? So coming back over to here is that they've built this stuff. It's not really for customers, but for whatever reason, they've made it available to customers. And, that has some weird side effects, right? So for instance, they're really excited to build new cool things. We all get excited about them, but then they might graveyard them because they'll go, well, you know what? Now that we think of it from a business perspective, this doesn't really make money, or the person that built it's not around and the people around do not want to maintain it. And so this happens a lot. So you got to be really afraid about building on GCP sometimes. And their core services are fine. Like virtual machines are not going away. BigQuery is not going away. But like, for example, Google domains. Google used to be able to register domains just like Ref3. And then one day they just decided to get rid of them. And they gave you no assurance. I was a Google, what was it called? Google champion or whatever it was in their program. And I remember them, like, everyone was asking, like, hey, what's going to happen to our domains? You're selling them to Square. And, there are cases where this might mess up our workloads. You're not going to just drop the ball on us. And the people there were like, no, we're not going to drop the ball on customers. And then somebody up at Google, they just said, no, we're not doing that. We don't care. And then customers got screwed. And so this happens very frequently. Oh yeah, Google Podcasts. Yeah. So there's this kind of issue with Google. But again, their products are really good. And, my favorite thing about Google, especially if you are a startup and you want to have rapid deployments, and their Linux servers, like the like what is it called, E2s or whatever, they start like within less than a minute, like 30 seconds. And so if you need rapid deployment, and you're just using the old-fashioned virtual machine, it's really nice. And also just when you're utilizing GCP, you can feel that it has like a developer focus. I have it somewhere here. Yeah, so opinionated defaults, excellent developer brain. So when you're using GCP and you're configuring stuff, they kind of like allude to what is there. And so like even when you're launching a virtual machine, they'll talk about like the disk and things like that, where those concepts will be abstracted away. You don't really think of like the hardware underneath. And so you can really feel that the people here are more developer focused. But yeah, they have previews and they always feel really powerful. But as we said earlier, they can be a bit dangerous. The UI has always looked really good. But I always think of like the UI as a facade with Google or GCP. If you've ever been to their conference, boy, they have beautiful expo halls. Just everything just feels like such a great community. But when we talk about their UI, it just feels like a facade. Like it hasn't kept up to date with even AWS or Azure. And sometimes you'll like go into a service and open a door, and then everything is just like, just not working really well. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like, you have like autocomplete drop downs and everything's like really nice and easy. And then you'll go and take a left turn and then you'll have none of that there whatsoever. And so I don't know, GCP has been a bit of a headache, but GCP Cloud Shell. Oh, well, okay. So the GCP API, the GCP CLI is wonderful. If you've ever used, I think the way the Kubernetes one works is the same way that GCP one works. It's very modular. Once you learn the patterns, it's super, super easy to use. Google Cloud Shell, the actual environment where you can have a terminal. Like obviously AWS and Azure have ones, but GCP is like very well integrated. So like if you need something, they'll output in like a CLI call or API call. It's just wonderful. So from a developer perspective, it's great. But if you're doing ClickOps, which you really shouldn't be doing, it's not the best experience. Also, GCP, you have to turn on every single little service. AWS, I think all the services are turned on by default with some features turned off with service limits. Azure, not everything's turned on, but a lot of it is turned on. But GCP has this concept that everything you want to use, you got to turn on. And so there can be this headache of turning on services. Yeah, terrible service and support. I think there's no way to get around this unless somebody has a different opinion here. I've not had great experience with GCP support. It's just expensive and it's not easy to utilize and it's slow. So yeah, GCP is built for Google. Customers can join in, but Google treats GCP like a playground and you, the customer, are one of their toys. That's the way I describe it. There's probably other things that can talk about GCP, like how they're really good at health tech and things like that. But this is the best thing over there. So folks, what do you think? Do you think we got it right here? Anybody disagree with my takes here? Beko, what do you think? It's okay? Yeah, Beko says it's fine. Okay. So we're going to make our way over to our architectural diagrams. And so we have our AWS architectural diagram, our Azure architectural diagram, and our GCP architectural diagram. So I just want to talk about where I made deviations here so that when you enter into these ones, if you decide to do one or the other, why they are the way they are. As I worked on these, I did not make the architectural diagrams up front. Sometimes I do that. So like most boot camps, the first week, the pre-week, we will do architectural diagram of what we plan to build, and then we go build it out. And this one, because it was so simple, I just went and built it out. And I'm retroactively making these things and explaining our decisions. Even if we had architected these in the pre-week, there's no chance that they would have been the same anyway. So it could have been interesting to say like, yeah, we would have used Azure CDN or whatever. But I mean, like if we did do that exploration at the first, we might have found out, maybe we might have found out like Azure CDN is no longer around, right? Because we would have done the research. So doing some upfront research is a good idea. And so it could have saved us some pain. But in this case, I was overconfident because it was so simple, right? Andrew, do you think large companies use Aviatrix to migrate cloud outages? I don't know, but I know that Aviatrix is. I know some things about Aviatrix that I probably can't say on a live stream. But if you have more questions, ask me later. I was just thinking about that. But anyway, I know some things about Aviatrix for some reason. Anyway, does GCP and AWS have a separate CLI for developers like Azure? Does GCP and AWS have a separate CLI for developers like Azure, AZD CLI. There are a few isolate ones, but they basically, some of them have been gone. So G-Cloud has GSUtil, which is for interacting with buckets, but now it's not best practice to use GSUtil anymore, and so it's been integrated into G-Cloud. AWS used to have one specifically for S3. Obviously, they have one just for Cloud, for the SAM, for SAM CLI, the serverless extension of CloudFormation. And then they have like a deploy one. And then there are some services that have very specific ones. I guess over on GCP, they would also have like something like one for Firebase, Firestar. So there are specialized ones. So I would say that they're more or less the same. Okay. I wouldn't say you have to migrate. I would just say that there could be a change of hands over at Aviatrix. You know what I mean? Kind of like, Terraform, right? And HashiCorp, and now they're under the IBM cloud. So, there could be some changes, and that could, remember like when VMware got acquired and that made a change of hands, there might be that consideration with Aviatrix, but it depends on your company. Again, I can tell you later in the privates. Anyway, so coming back over to here, we'll go back over to AWS. And so let's just take a look at this architecture. So the one thing is that for this, I'd show you two ways to bring your domain. So Route 53 allows the ability for you to register a domain, right? That is a way that you can do it. Another way that you can do it is you can use a third-party provider like Namecheap or GoDaddy and import your name. I had to do it both ways, and so I show you both ways. You do not have to do it both ways. But let's get out our Excel spreadsheet as we're working through this and just work through cost. So with AWS, you can register your domain name with Route 53. There is no additional cost for having the domain. Like there's no overhead with AWS. But if you buy a domain, I do not believe they charge you a yearly fee for holding it. But you're going to be able to buy your domain. So like domain register. And that's going to be, whatever the cost of the domain is. And so this could be something like $15, $20. We'll just say $15, $17. Everything's going to be in USD, by the way. And so that's me registering the domain. If you want to register something over on GoDaddy or Namecheap, right? This could be the same cost. We'll say maybe $15. It really depends on your domain. Sometimes when you buy domains, the first year is really cheap and the next year is very expensive. Can you zoom in a bit? Absolutely. Okay. So, it's up to you what that cost is going to be. But I don't believe there's any additional cost for having a hosted zone. So we might go here and say Route 53 hosted zone cost. I don't think there is any, but we'll go double check. We could go ask ChatGPT, but honestly, when it comes to money, I would go look up the official docs. So we'll say Route 53 pricing, and we'll see if there's any hidden costs here that I'm not aware of. I think I just saw something for hosted zone. So here I'm looking through pricing and authoritative DNS. Author, I can't say that. No, it is authoritative DNS. So the monthly hosted zone pricing listed above are not for partial months. A hosted zone is charged at the time it's created for the first 12 days. So maybe there is a cost for DNS zones and records. I know, Baco, but Baco's saying like it's right there in front of you. But the reason why it confuses me, Baco, is just because they say authoritative. It makes me think that it's like something additional. So I guess there is a cost. I just never noticed it. So is there any free tier in here? So to allow testing, et cetera, et cetera. So a hosted zone includes 100,000 records. Was it free before? I don't really remember these costs here, but it says 50 cents per zone per month. 10 cents per cost. So these are the first things we're bringing in. So we're already getting some costs in here. Oh, that's a shame. They're basically unavoidable costs. Is there no like free tier hosted zones? We don't even get one free. Yeah. And so Baco's saying in my ear, you could just use Namecheap, but then you wouldn't get the alias feature, right? So I could have swore there was a free tier. Oh, we could also use the pricing calculator, by the way. And so there are these costs here. Okay, so we'll go here. And so I guess I was wrong. In my brain, they were free. We'll bring in this one. Wonder what it is after the first one's there, and this will be this one. So this will be the host zone. Hosted zone. I really should just write it in and not copy paste it. That gets too confusing. There's obviously a pricing calculator we can use. We'll go back over to here. And so then we have 10 cents per hosted zone per month. Oh, so that's more like if you have additional ones. So we're going to ignore the additional one here. We don't care about it. We'll take it out. And so this is our cost. We probably should also put the period here. So per month, yearly, monthly. Okay, so now per zone, we have this issue. Let's go take a look and see if there's anything additional. And here it says, an authoritative DNS server is the ultimate source of truth for a specific domain, holding the definitive and official DNS record. Thank you, folks. Also, I think authoritative, to emphasize, it's different from a non-authoritative DNS, e.g. caching. Okay. It's 10,000 A records down here. No, I think it's 10,000 records in general. A hosted zone up to 10,000 records. And so I'm not going to really think about this part. You'll be charged for each record greater than 10,000, less than a cent. Okay. I think it's all records. I like that we have networking folks in here because I'm terrible at networking. You know from the networking bootcamp that I can't do it by myself. Anyway, so that's our cost here. Let's expand this. And there's other things like you don't have to do health checks. Okay. You don't have to use resolvers. That's a complex feature. We're talking about domains. So I do not believe there's any additional domain costs here. The default 20 per account. That's just the limit of how many you can have. Profiles, we're not going to utilize that. I couldn't even tell you what a profile is. DNS firewalls, those are definitely advanced features. So there's nothing else here. And so our big cost here is 50 cents American, right? And then these costs here. So that's that. Let's go back to our diagramming. Okay. And so here we can see our architecture, right? So we have a user, goes over the internets with our registered domain here. And then we have 3 records. So the cost here isn't going to be great. But the reason why we are using hosted zones here, so we can use the alias feature. The alias feature means that if the address, the underlying IP address or the actual fully qualified domain changes, then it'll automatically reroute, right? So if we don't use it, if we just use Namecheap, and we can just use Namecheap and point it to the thing to avoid that 50 cents cost if you want to, then we can avoid that cost there. But generally, that cost is so low, the 50 cents or whatever, it's not a big deal to do that. And having this is worth it, in my opinion. But that's up to you. It's your concern for your cost. So just understand, you don't have to use the hosted zone. You can use Namecheap and manage the domain from there. Okay, but I don't show that. But it should be easy to figure enough. Showing the examples that we show for all the ones here. Let's go over to Azure. So Azure does not have the means to register a domain. Okay, they've never had that thing. I know they're partnered with other folks, and so they do have recommendations to who you can utilize. I do not remember who they are anymore. Same thing with their SSL certificates. Their SSL certificates, I believe, are third party, but maybe they have their own now. But originally, they would say like use Verizon or so, I don't know. But I just remember there being a list of SSL partners, right? And so we can use Azure DNS. And originally, that's what I was going to do. And I think I show you how to do it. And you can still go through that process and learn how to do it. The only problem is that I actually ended up using Cloudflare. Okay. And the reason we ended up using Cloudflare was that we found out that the load balancer was really, really, really expensive. And the caching solution for Azure was really, really expensive, like per year for a static website. And so I ended up in the situation where I had to use something else. And we had to use Cloudflare for the CDN. And if you want to use Cloudflare, you need to point your name servers and have them manage the domain. And so we ended up using Cloudflare. Okay. I'm going to tell you right now, Cloudflare, I believe it's zero cost because I did not put a credit card in. So we'll go over to here. And we can, if we want, say like Cloud DNS and just figure out, like if you did want to use Azure DNS, we can take a look at the cost. Okay. But for the most part, we are using Cloudflare. And so here it is $0. But we'll go take a look and be more definitive about what that is. The nice thing is that we're using Cloudflare for both AWS or Azure and GCP. So if we look at the cost once, we're going to get them for both. Okay. So we'll go here to pricing and we'll see if we can figure out their pricing. The pricing is a little bit of a nightmare. Hold on here. For Azure, did you go with standard load balancer or app gateway, or app gateway is expensive? They were all expensive. And the other issue was the fact that it's what we're load balancing, right? So we were looking at Azure Front Door, and Azure Front, because we wanted the CDN for the caching. It's part of Azure Front Door. And then the other part of it is we wanted to route things over to a function. Then we need to use Azure Front Door, and it was too expensive. We did not explore App Gateway because those are for virtual machines. And so we're not running things at a virtual machine, unless I'm mistaken. Azure Application Gateway, I don't believe that it can go to Azure Functions. But maybe they can, because they're always integrating with everything. It does go to app services, so technically it could go over. We could use it for that, but let's go take a look at the pricing. I can't remember if I looked up the pricing in the course. As we do the courses, I'll actually look up the costs. But let's take a look here and see what it is. Yeah, so right off the bat, this one's too expensive. Look, it's 0.246 for that, just to use it. Let's go take a look at that. So if we do this and we say times 730, that's per month. It's $179 to utilize the standard version of Application Gateway. So that's probably what I did. I probably looked it up. I said, that's too darn expensive. And so we can add that here just as an idea. Like, why I didn't choose something the way I did it. We'll say Azure App Gateway. I know you said there was standard, but isn't that the standard load balancer? There's no like other load balancer, right? Let me just double check. Azure load balancer. And well, there's Azure load balancer, but it's retired. Okay, so this is where you know, like, you know, you want to use something, you know there's a cheaper solution, but you can't use it. But we'll go here, and so this is per hour, but we know this is per monthly, so times 730. This is monthly. The monthly cost 730 is this. So we'll go here and just say up here, standard, just standard is this per month. So not doable for a basic website. Not doable. Okay, or like we can't justify cost, cannot justify cost for a simple function. Okay, so that one's not going to work. But anyway, let's take a look at Azure DNS. I have repeated it here twice for some reason. Well, let's go figure out the cost of Azure DNS. Because some folks here might want to build everything out and then just tear down the infrastructure. That's a thing you can do, right? So here, I don't rely on that summary. Let's make sure we double check here. And so here, it is the same as AWS, more or less. And then there's a query cost. I don't think we have to worry about building queries, so we're not going to put that cost here. 1,000 domains in a list. We don't need a domain list, so I don't think we are incurring that cost. And so our cost here is probably the first 25 domains, so it's 0.25. So we'll go up to here, and it's the same for this one, hosted zones. We got twinsies here. And so for fun, we're going to color these green. We'll color things green just so we can see where things are similar, right? I think App Gateway and WAF are more security focused. Front Door is more about delivery. I mean, that's the case as well. I would say that's probably the case as well. Query still cost. It's for the first billion. Oh, okay. So there is still a cost involved in it. Let's go up here. Really? So even if I use one query, it's going to cost 60 cents? I don't like that. Problem here is that like these numbers are so low, I would not even notice them on my bill. Okay, so we'll go here. First million or first billion or million? If you're under $1 million, it's 0.40 cents. Oh, well, how nice is that? Okay, so we'll adjust that. I didn't see it there, but under per month. Maybe I'll say monthly here. When under $1 million, under 1 mil. When over, then 0.60. Oh, was there an asterisk on it? I don't see it here, but oh, down here? Yeah, down here. So that's where it was. Additional DNS. Okay. So that's what it's doing. They're adding that additional one there, and it becomes that cost over 1 billion per month. All right. So we'll go back over to here. And so, you know, again, it's minimal. It's minimal if you happen to use it, but we're not using it. I guess we were doing Cloudflare. We kind of got lost off track here. So we're going to go back over to Cloudflare pricing. And we'll take a look here. I remember pricing for Cloudflare was a little bit all over the place. It was a bit confusing. It's the nickel and dime algorithm. Yep. I agree. So we're going over here and we're on the free one. And I mean, it's free to what limit? So we have 70 rules. Is there a limit for many? I don't think there's a limit to how many domains they can manage. I feel like they want you to get them all there. So I'm going here. I guess it's probably networking services. And so I'm not seeing any hard stops here. Like what I'm looking for here, probably applications. I'm trying to see, like, is there a limit to how many? There doesn't seem to be any limit. I'm thinking the reason why is they want you to get all the domains there. Unless somebody sees something that I don't see here. 100 host names free. There it is. 10 cents per additional. So there it is down below. So we'll go over to here. And we will, I guess we can just put this separate here because Cloudflare really is its own service. And we'll just say hosted zones. We'll say, 0, first 100. So monthly, first 100 free, then 0.10 cents per additional. Very generous, very, very generous. It says, I've used Cloudflare for years. I pay them to maintain host names, but I haven't paid anything to operate the host names. Well, that's good. I would love to give Fastly a try. It's been a long time since I've used it, but first $100, not $100. First 100 are free. So we have our hosted zones here. Let's go over to GCP and take a look. So GCP doesn't have GCP domains anymore, even though it still shows up in the UI. This is what I say when I say GCP is a bit of a facade where they don't keep everything up to date. But they do have a service called, it's called Cloud CDN. So we're over to here, or DNS, Cloud DNS, sorry. And so we'll go and bring this down. And we'll say Cloud DNS. Technically, this one, you could even break this off into its own service. We'll go down here and just say Namecheap. And over here, I just want to make indication like greatly varies per domain and could have promotional first year. And so we'll put that in there. New customers get $300 in credit. Well, that sounds good, but if they're giving us credits, it makes it sound like it's going to be very expensive once it runs out. So Cloud DNS is simple and effective. With cloud domains registration pricing is simple and transparent through cloudbilling.com and .net. What? I thought they don't have cloud domains anymore. Any GCP experts? Cloud domains is gone, right? I don't think you can use it anymore. Let's go over here and take a look. So go here, cloud domains. Maybe they still have it for enterprise users. I don't think it's here anymore. Cloud domains. Additional actions may be required to resolve. So we'll say continue. I thought this was gone. GCP cloud domains. When I was doing this, it wasn't working. Let's go to news. Sometimes it helps to go to news. No, I'm pretty sure it's gone. Yeah, Squarespace bought it. That's what I know for certain. But in the interface here, like I think we click here, it should give us an error. Oh, so they fully integrated it. Okay, because at one point when they got rid of it, literally you'd go in here, and I remember you weren't able to use it. So now if you utilize it, it's directly integrated and then it's purchased on Squarespace. Does that sound right, Dan? Like I remember like when they got rid of it, it would go in here and it gave you a message saying like, don't go buy anymore. But maybe I've just avoided it since. Okay, so maybe you can register domains through Squarespace. So let's go make a note on that. Okay, so go up to here and I'll just say Google Domains. And we'll put an asterisk here. Okay, I'm going to assume it's the same thing, like $15, something like that. So month, yearly. So Google Domains appears to be back, but directly integrated with Squarespace within the UI. Okay, so that's really, really interesting. We should probably put it on the correct line. Also, we should probably put these in the actual correct category. That might help. Not sure how you folks feel about that. We should put things in the correct place. But obviously, I'm joking. And so we'll go here, clear that out. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think I would even touch it. Does Azure table storage work over Cosmos DB for our use case? Could you use it? You could use it, but we just use the key vector store. So you could use it if you wanted to. But we'll come to that when we get to that. We should have time to get to it. We still have an hour here to get through stuff, as long as we don't get too much into the weeds. But anyway, so we have a zero cost here. There's a bunch of other things that we're utilizing on Cloudflare, but let's just focus on the, well, actually, no, all the stuff is related to it. So we might have to actually look at it right now. So if we go back to our diagram, and the diagrams are the same for the Azure and GCP. You notice here we have the zones, we have rules, we have worker routes, we have workers. So, you know, we might have to look at pricing for these. I don't know if they're individually priced, but there's like workers, you know, rules. And we'll go back to Cloudflare, or sorry, yeah, Cloudflare, wherever their pricing page is here. Pricing, and see if we can figure things out here. So we go here. And I feel like everything is here, but it says like you get 70 rules. So that's fine. What about workers? 70 rules. Where's the workers? Workers. Maybe developer platform. Up to 100 worker scripts. So basically, you know, these are generous. These are 0, 0. So like, it's like up to 100 free, up to, I don't think it's 100 rules, but it's some, I think it's more than that, no? 70 rules, 70 rules. Okay, so basically Cloudflare, super, super cheap. Okay, so that kind of solves our Cloudflare pricing. And what we'll do is we'll go back over to here and we'll start looking at the next component. So we'll go over to here. So I guess the next thing would be maybe our bucket. So obviously each provider has their own bucket. We'll start with AWS. AWS should be pretty easy to figure out. Where is it? It is over here. And we technically have 2 buckets, right? And so it's not it's not cost per bucket. It's more cost of data that's in bucket and data being moved around. So what we'll do is we'll go up over to AWS. We'll say S3 bucket. There's going to be there's going to be like requests, S3 bucket storage, and then there will be S3 bucket data transfer. And it's not necessarily S3 bucket data transfer, it's just general data transfer out with AWS. There's a cost with it. Okay, so those are our 3 costs. Let's go take a look and see if we can find that. So we'll go over to S3 here and say costs. And we'll go to pricing. And we'll go over to pricing. And so here we have our storage requests. So the first 50 terabytes is very, very low. And I can't remember if there's a free tier here, but you can see that the pricing is in the pennies. Okay. Per gigabyte. And that is monthly cost, I believe, monthly. And that's storage, not requests. And we have to specify standard. Okay. We're not going to use anything other than standard because, why would we? We'll go over to here and it depends on how frequently your data is accessed. But if this is the website, it could be accessed at any time. And so we wouldn't want to change the storage classes for it. Then we have request and retrieval. Retrieval is coming from archival storage. We're not going to be doing that. But here we can see we have requests for put, copy, post, list, get, select. So these are like API calls that you're making. I don't believe that they are. Well, I guess if data is getting requested for any reason, then if CloudFront's grabbing data, then it's going to be calling these calls here. But here it's put, copy, post, list, request 1,000 per, get, select. So I'm not exactly sure how we want to price this, but we can just bring in these general costs here. I'm just going to slash them here. Beko, have you ever noticed these costs in our bill for the requests? Yeah, Beko just says we don't dig that far. They're just so inconsequential that we would never even notice them. Anybody here dealing with S3 costs where you'd notice this stuff? Just curious. But I don't even think about these because our volume's so low. Even for Exam Pro, where we have a lot of users and a lot of stuff being accessed, we barely factor this in or even take a look at it. So I'd be curious if this would even show up on anybody's bill. And I can't seem to make a new line here. There's a way of doing it. It's Control-Shift-Enter. I'll just put it on the next line here. I'm not going to get it. I'm trying to do down here 1 second. We'll go over. And so this cost is going to be really, really low. I'm not even going to think about it. Okay. We have data transfer out. So that should be somewhere here. Transfer out. Data transfer. And there's a bunch of rules among this. Data transfer out to the internet for the first 100 aggregate across. You pay for the bandwidth into and out except for the following. So your first 100 gigabyte monthly across all AWS services and regions is free. Data transfer in from the internet, data transfer between S3 buckets. Insert office space, fractions of a penny. Yep. So here it is, data transfer out from S3 to the internet. So this is what we're concerned about. But notice that the cost is slightly different. So with CloudFront, it's $0. Okay, so does that mean that if something gets grabbed from CloudFront and through it, then it's 0? Or would there still be that cost of that's what I don't know. First 10. What I'm trying to say here is okay, we have data out. We have data out for, let's say, 10 gigabytes. And so we pay 9 cents. Let's say we're using CloudFront. Do we still pay that 9 cents or do we not pay anything because CloudFront's free? I don't know that off the top of my head. I'd ask you, Beko, but I'm going to assume you don't know either. You're just going to say, I don't know. Oh, this is per gigabyte, not 10 gigabytes. And I guess it's per, not first. monthly. So say data out from S3. So we've added Cloudflare there as well, or CloudFront. CloudFront is our CDN, which we have. Well, I guess we already covered the CDN more or less for Cloudflare, but we'll circle back here in a moment. And so those are the general costs for that. Let's take a look at Azure, which is going to be more of a headache for me at least. Probably easy for Bako. Bako's really good at Azure. He knows the pricing inside and out. So I hope you do, because I'm going to be bugging you in 2 seconds. So we're going to go take a look at Azure, Microsoft Azure Storage. So with Azure, when you create, so like we said earlier that with AWS, they treat everything as isolate, right? So Amazon S3 is its own service. But with Azure, there's a lot of umbrella services, right? And so before you even get your bucket, which it's not called a bucket in Azure, before you create your container for blob storage, for object storage, you have to create a storage account, which is an umbrella service that can provision many types of storage, if that makes any sense. And so we go over to here, and so we need to provision a storage account. And we got to choose what type of SKU, like product offering that we're going to get. And so we're going to choose storage version 2 because that's going to give us blob storage. And it's generally the new way of doing it. The other thing of it is that we have to choose our redundancy. So we have, was it local redundant storage? So it's a lower level of redundancy, so it's more cost effective. It says, happy to stay within the AWS region for transfer out, not to count. Is the CloudFront flat rate work for this? There is a free tier including S3, R53, Route 53, among others. We can look up Cloudflare pricing, Cloudflare free tier. I mean, obviously, there's a free tier for it up to a certain point, CloudFront. Free tier. Let's take a look here and just make sure we know. Because they traditionally have a free tier there. We'll say Cloudflare or CloudFront. We're getting them mixed up here. And we go here. I guess we just, wait, let's go back here. 1 terabyte data transfer out in the free tier. That's what it's saying. And I'm assuming that's per month. So if we go here, flat rate pricing plan. Yeah, but it's per month forever, I believe. Yeah, so, and I think that's what we have in here. If we go back over to here. So it says 1 gigabyte per monthly forever. And so that's that flat rate pricing right there. There's a new flat rate. That's what it is, no? However, data transfer out from cloud for the internet does not count against your quota. Oh, okay, good. Anyway, so coming back over to storage accounts, pricing. So the idea is that we've chosen 2 things. So here we have standard GPT version storage 2. That's what we're utilizing. Notice there's like blob only. So when I was first thinking this, I'm like, oh, we're just doing blob storage, right? But we still had to choose because there's actually different types of blob storage. I forgot there's like page, and something else. Bako, you probably know. And so we chose version 2 here, and then we got to go down here and figure out the pricing. And I really dislike, oh yeah, see up here, see like we choose a redundancy. So if we change what it is, the cost is going to be different. Where it's hosted is going to be different, right? So maybe it's East US, LRS, so the region's going to matter. So we might want to go back to our diagram and just indicate that. So like, where is my storage? I don't even know. So we go back over to Azure here, and we go to our storage accounts. It's East US, right? So I might want to indicate that because it's going to affect pricing, right? We'll say East US. And, you know, for AWS, I don't think there's different pricing per region for buckets. And the reason I don't think it is because it's a global service. Maybe there is. Let's go see. Bucket storage, AWS pricing, buckets. I could be wrong. The one thing with cloud is it's always, I could be wrong. You have to triple check. It's so hard to remember, and they're always changing things on us. We'll go back over to pricing here. And so what I'm looking for, yeah, so it is, yeah, region as well, right? Does it change by much? Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's some changes going on here. So I'm just going to see if it's generally the same. Yeah, so there is a slight difference for cost. And so keep the buck in the same region as your service to minimize inter-region transfer costs. That's another consideration as well. Okay. And so that might be something we might want to put a note on here. I mean, that's like that's a given, but again, this is a beginner boot camp, so we'll just go put a note on here. I like these notes; these are really nice. And so we'll go over to our bucket. Where's our bucket? Over here. Okay. Remember to put our S3 bucket in the same region as our other resources to minimize inter-region transfer costs. Okay. So we have that note there now. But I guess it's not really worth us to go in. Like, I guess I could put the price of what mine is, but I'm not going to go in and meticulously do that because the costs are more or less the same, but at scale, it's going to matter, right? But for us, I can't imagine, oh, that makes me so hungry. I can't imagine that there would be a region that would be so expensive that we would need to take account for that. But I could be wrong, but I don't believe that's the case. Let's go back over to Azure pricing. If I could find the tab. Let's close some of these out so we don't get confused. And so here we have our pricing. I believe it would be premium. What do you think it would be, Bako? No, you'd have to choose premium for premium storage, right? And so it'd be hot. How do we know what it is? Yeah, Bako's saying it's based on how frequently you access the data. Yes, but I do believe that you can choose the type of storage it is. It's not just how often it is, right? And you can choose whether something is premium. That's what I thought. I guess the way we could check is if we went into containers and we looked at our data, maybe we could check if that's on there. So I'm just going to double check here. Hot inferred, right? Okay, so there it is. But can we change the access tier? I thought we could change tier right here. So we go to our tier, and tier we can change it, right? And so that's what we're using. We're using hot for everything. And yep. So we'll go over to here and back over to our storage. And we do specify our storage, which is called standard, which is basically the same thing as hot when we're looking at storage. But we'll say hot storage. And so that's going to be our cost. How do we get to premium? I can't remember. I believe we actually have to set our SKU to be premium, and then we'll have access to that premium tier. That's why we don't see it there. So we'll go back over to here. And this is saying, and I am in East US. I didn't use Canada. And so, we're using this one. This is the one we're using. So it's this for the first 50 terabytes. We're so lucky that we have so many cloud engineers and folks here to help us out and get all the best information. That's what I like about the boot camps is that, whether it's guest instructors or just our boot campers, they're just here to like basically make it good because we all can collectively share our knowledge together at the same time. So we go here, monthly. This is per gigabyte, and I think it's first 50 terabytes. First 50 terabytes. Okay, so who has the better deal here? It looks like AWS. Well, barely. I guess, again, it depends on the region too. So we'll continue on here. So I would imagine that Azure would have requests and other costs. We have data transfer out. So we got hot here, first 10,000 operations. So it's read and write. They're separate. Okay. I don't think it was separate for AWS. I think it was just the same, right? So we have read and then write. And this is data transfer. And so we have 60 cents, about 60 cents here. It's really interesting to see how their pricing is different, like how they break it down differently too. Read operations. And it's going to be per 10. Per 10. Per 10. And then we'll go up to here and just compare it. So we're just seeing a single cost here. We have two different factors. At least the read is cheaper, which is really nice. I like that. Azure CDN, we can't factor it anymore because it's deprecated. But it used to have a free tier, I believe. Or if it wasn't, it was basically it was like Azure or AWS CloudFront, where it made it deprecated. But here's the thing. I think it was Jose still actually has an active Azure CDN, so they can still use it and benefit from that cost. But I wasn't able to use it. But generally, this was the go-to way of having your CDN. But anyway, we're going to continue on to GCP and stay on top of buckets here. Wait, did we get everything here? We got, we didn't do requests if they're even, well, sorry, this is the request, right? No, that's data transfer out. Is there anything for requests, like API calls here? And technically we are doing blob storage. Is there any additional blob storage costs? Because I see blob here. Intelligent data sub-resource consisting of user-defined values. This provides a managed multi-dimension. But does the blob index have to be turned on? Or is that by default? Provides data management. Okay, but do we have to turn it on? I can't tell here. So what I will do is I'll just make a note here. And we'll say blob index. There is a cost. We don't know if this needs to be turned on or is already on. So there's a little cost there. And is that blob pages or just the regular blob stuff? I don't know. Per 10 tags. Okay. Data transfer prices for block blobs. We're not using block blobs, I don't think. So I think we're fine for that. I don't think we include that. Geo priority replicate prices. We're not doing any replication. We're just local redundant replication. And so none of them, there's no LRS on there. Object replication priority replication prices. I don't know if this takes effect. So I'm not sure if this takes effect, but this could be another issue here. Inventory, I don't know if that takes effect. So we have a few costs we don't know about. Maybe we'll task Bako to finding this stuff out because he loves Azure so much because he chose Azure as his favorite. So we go here and like, is this a thing we got to worry about? Is this a thing we got to worry about? I don't know. Or if any Azure experts want to chime in, help us out here. But I don't think we have to worry about those costs. Okay. Anyway, so there's those uncertainties. Let's go over to GCP. GCP cloud storage pricing. Okay. It's a bit hot and it's a bit cold here, so you're going to see me alternating with the snowsuit. Okay, so we'll go over to our storage pricing here. And we'll look at our pricing table. So with GCP, you get to choose what the default is when things go into the bucket. I can't remember if that actually happens with AWS or not, but it just seems to be very prominent when you go over to GCP, when you first set up a bucket. They make that really clear that you're choosing a standard price class. Maybe you do that in AWS. It's just I don't use the UI too often, but for GCP, I do. So we have region, whatever. We go here. And so here you can choose the default, or can you auto class it? All providers have an auto class, I believe. They're just not called auto class, maybe like intelligent storage or whatever. And so obviously we're going to be using standard. Notice that AWS and GCP both call them standard, and Azure calls them hot. Whatever the better name is, I don't know, but that's what they are. So we'll go back over to here. And so here we can see GCP storage, bucket. Okay, and we have this one here. Wow, did they put a lot of decimals for this one? Obviously, the region is going to affect where it is. It's on a monthly cost here. And this is for standard storage. 1 gigabit per hour per month. That's interesting. I don't even know how to read that. 1 gigabit per hour per month. Does that mean like if you stop using it, like they're literally going to bill at the hourly interval? That's interesting. Okay. I wonder if the other providers do that. I'm not really sure. We always see the monthly cost, right? Anyway, and then it's dependent on your region storage. Is it region, dual region, multi-region, right? I think we're just doing a single region. And so if you look at the cost, it's not like jumping up like by much or at all. At least not here on the, well, hold on standard. Oh, it changes. I guess I was looking at the near line, but for standard here, you can see it gets more expensive. It's really cheap in the single region. Gigabit. What the heck is that? A gigabyte is a unit of decimal information equal to whatever that is. Okay. I feel like that would be a term we should learn and use more often just to throw people off. A gigabyte. I can't even say it. It's ridiculous. Oh, all right. So we have our storage cost here. Minimum storage duration, none. That's fine. And then here, I'm going to turn the heat on a little bit here, folks. There we go. I'm just stuck in this hot and cold kind of in between here. So down below here, we have our operational charges. So this is going to be, I guess, our requests, right? Do you like how they all name them differently? And we'll go over to GCP here, and we're going to say operations. Same thing as charges, or the same thing as our read and writes, but here it's just 1,000 operations. And I'm going to assume that's per month. How does that work? Or is it every 1,000 operations you pay 0.5 cents? So here I might put a note like, is this per month? I would think that's per month, right? Accumulated per hours, perhaps, maybe. I'm really not certain. It's not saying. And then, oh, and we're in a single region. Obviously, the pricing is different here. It probably says down below here. When listening to buckets in a project, no, I can't really figure that out there. Retrieval fees, 0, so we don't have to worry about that. Interregional, inter-region replication. So this could be an issue if we're in different regions, but like inter-region replication. I don't think we have to pay this because 0 because we keep everything in the same region. But I'm just going to list it there so people are aware of that cost could be there if you're across regions. But we should be all in the same region. Then we have data transfer out. What about data transfer out? Here it is, data transfer out. Okay. So we don't get confused here. Data transfer out. We are going to see 0.2 cents. And that's per gigabyte. Again, I'm going to assume it's per month. And then we have these as well. So this is where it gets a little bit muddled. So I'm not exactly sure, but we have a general idea of that cost. I mean, yeah, it seems pretty cost effective. Like just the fact that you can choose the level of redundancy and make that really, really cheap is really nice. I do believe AWS has the means to have like no redundancy failover. So we might be able to match that cost on AWS and Azure as well. But, you know, for defaults, it's pretty good. Okay, so we have our bucket solved. Let's go back over to our diagramming over here. And so CloudFront is solved for Azure. For Azure Front Door is really expensive. So that was a possible solution that we could utilize, Azure Front Door. And if we look at the pricing for it, obviously, like this is not exactly the pricing of what we're utilizing. It's just pricing in general that we're exploring. But notice here, standard is $35 a month. Crazy, eh? But I guess maybe not for enterprises, but crazy for our website. 35 over here, 35 per month. So right off the bat, not worth it. And you know what? They had variable pricing before, and then they introduced these plans later. I remember them having it, didn't they, Baco? We didn't pay $35 a month over month, did we? For when we used the identity provider. Okay. Yeah, he was saying we were paying even more than that, but I guess we were doing something more advanced. But I'm glad we stopped doing that. We now have our own. So you know, we didn't use Azure Front Door. Or sorry. So again, you know, when you see me use Azure Front Door, don't use it if you are worried about this cost. If you are trying to showcase your skills, that you know how to use Azure Front Door, and you plan to tear down that infrastructure, you can do so. And I think that's something you can do. Okay, if you choose to want to do that. So we're not going to get in the full pricing of Azure Front Door, but I just wanted to show how expensive it was. I don't know if there's a cost for the SSL. I think Microsoft has their own now, so that's less of an issue. Let's go take a look at GCP's solution for, it's called GCP. I think it's it's GCP Load Balancer. That's what has the CDN attached to it. So we'll say Google Cloud CDN. Maybe it's called Google Cloud CDN. That's what it is called. Yeah. And we'll go over to here to the pricing. And I believe the CDN, in order to use the CDN, you have to have an application, or a global load balancer. You have to use a load balancer in order to use the CDN. So it doesn't matter if the costs here are cheap. I believe it's relying on that. I'm going to go ask ChatGPT, so I don't have to look this up. Oh, by the way, while we're over here in ChatGPT, I know Ramsey was asking this question earlier of like, why would you use www instead of the naked domain? Because a lot of people prefer this. And I generally know why, but I can't articulate it very well. And I just wanted to see if ChatGPT would give us the reasons as to why, and I could confirm if it's correct. And so let's just walk through this quickly here. So DNS reliability. So it is true. There are some providers where you have to use a www domain, but it's not true for all cases. Like CloudFront doesn't care. You can use a naked domain with it. But I do believe something like Netlify or maybe Vercel will only let you use a subdomain. So that's one restriction. But I mean, like, that doesn't mean you have to. You would know that you'd have to use in that case. For load balancing failovers, www, you can change the hosting providers instantly, but with an Apex domain, you must update the records. I don't know this. I'm not a networking person. Baco, what do you think about this one? Do you think this is valid or no? For load bound, Baco was in VR, so he wasn't listening to me. We were doing a hackathon, so he's that's what I say. I got to keep his attention on the live stream. But like I was talking about load balancing. So here it says with a www domain on load balancing, you can change the hosting provider CDN and load balancer instantly by changing the CNAME. With an Apex domain, you must update the A record or rely on a DNS feature. Okay, Baker says, yeah. I'm too hungry to make sense of networking stuff. People hear networking folks are probably like, Andrew, come on, this is straightforward. CDNs prefer WW for caching and routing. I don't know if that's true, but it kind of feels like they do. Cookies, yes. That was the main reason why. Cookies. So cookies are a headache if you use the naked domain. They just are. I can't remember exactly why. I just know that this was a big headache for it. But if you have it on a subdomain, your life will be a lot easier. Baco, do you remember why cookies are easier if you use subdomains as opposed to naked domain, or no? Okay, but I know there was this, there's like a scoping issue or something that makes it complicated. For SEO, it doesn't matter. For certificates, it doesn't matter. But definitely it was cookies. I remember it's cookies. They're not saying it right here, but I know in practice because we've done it so many times. Baco was in VR. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to get Baco out of VR, to be honest. He's always in it. Anyway, so let's make our way back over to here. Oh, I remember why we went to ChatGPT. Do we need cloud load balancer to use cloud CDN for GCP? I'm pretty sure we do. Yes, in almost all modern setups, you need the load balancer to use it. So I don't think there was a case where I could use it without it. Old or deprecated setups. So historically, CDN could be enabled on the bucket directly without a load balancer. Google is deprecating this model and recommends cloud storage external, right? So this is where I was confused because I kind of remember being able to do hosting with cloud CDN. But then when I was going through this, it was like, oh, you have to use a load balancer. And I was like, really? You do? And so I guess maybe there's a change and that's what's going on here. So before we even look at the CDN costs, we need to look at the load balancer costs. And that's going to be our stopper here if it blows us out of the water here. And here, even for the first 5 rules, right? We go here. We times this by 730 per month. We're paying $18.25 for the first 5 rules. And I don't think we don't get a free load balancer. Now, is this an unreasonable cost? Not really. Like when you look at AWS, you pay $15 for an application load balancer, but they have that in the free tier, which makes it worth it. But we don't get free tier here. Okay, and so if this was free tier, then maybe we use Cloud CDN. Relies on global load balancer, and that doesn't have a free tier. So non-starters. So we could look up the cost, and it's probably minimal. Okay, but because we're not using the load balancer, we're not going to use the CDN, and that's why we're forced into utilizing that. And that's also another reason why we don't have a load balancer or in front of the functions. We'll talk about that in a moment. I'm just going to take a look at the time. I'm really hungry, and so I'm kind of losing concentration here, but we'll power through here. Okay. I had too much Hamburg steak yesterday, and so I was kind of running on that from yesterday. We'll go back over to here. And so, what are the other things that we need to price out? Well, there's the SSL. I'm pretty sure it's free on all of them, so we don't have to do that. But we have the function and possibly an API gateway if we even use one. Okay, so for AWS, these both have free tiers. Okay, so I know this is free. And we have the storage, right? So this, free, free, free. Okay, these are all free tier. I know they're free tier. I need a payday. I used to have paydays here on the left-hand side. And when I was on live stream, I'm too hungry. I'd slam one. I don't have any. It's the paydays have gotten kind of expensive in Canada. I have to now eat Mores. Folks, have you heard of Eat Mores before? They're my favorite Canadian chocolate bar in Eat More. If it has nuts in it, I like it. These things, they're so good. I love Eat Mores. I know they're ugly, but they're really, really good. But anyway, we'll come back over to what was I doing? I'm starting to forget. Our Excel spreadsheet, sorry. And so I know these are free. We can look them up, but like literally they're in the pennies. If not, they're free. There's not even any reason to look these up. Specifically, we're using HTTP. There are two API gateways. There's one called REST and there's one called HTTP. REST is more robust. And another thing that I don't want to go, I'm going to start talking too much about Canadian chocolate bars. So I'm not going to answer, go further with that. But anyway, API gateway, we have two versions on AWS. We have HTTP and we have REST. REST is the original one. It's very robust. It's really good. It's not that expensive, but it just has functionality we don't need. And so we end up using HTTP because it is overall lower cost, even though we'd never encounter costs with either of them on our free tier. But we do utilize that one and we use it through the SAM CLI, which makes it really, really easy. Okay. The cost here for DynamoDB is cheap and Llama is cheap. So we'll just go along with that. Let's go over to Azure. And so we have Azure Functions. I believe that they also have a very generous free tier. Azure Functions is interesting because you can host it in many places. It is under the App Services service. But we go to Azure Functions and we try to make sense of their pricing. It might be a little bit funner than AWS. AWS is very straightforward. It's just based on invocations. And then Azure pricing here. It's on-demand execution time, so something very similar. And 0026, it's pay-as-you-go. But I believe they have a free tier. Yeah, free grants 25,000 executions and consumption of resources here. So it's not just that. I think it's also like maybe storage used. But the point is that the Azure Functions is going to be free. Okay? Like we know for certain that it's going to be free, so we're not going to dive into that too much. So I'm trying to find Azure Functions, so it's free tier. The one that we need to be a bit concerned with, and I think, again, it has a free tier, is Cosmos DB. It depends on what we're using. So again, remember how I said that AWS, a service is a service is a service. It's an isolate thing. DynamoDB tables is a DynamoDB table. Cosmos DB is not a single service. It is a collection of possible storages for data, databases, just like storage accounts. And so we have to specify what it is that we are utilizing. We are utilizing the global document DB standard. That's what we're utilizing. So we'll have to look that up. Cosmos DB. I believe I use this one because it's free tier. If I can remember all the free tier stuff and they don't pull the rug on us here. So we'll go over to here. And so we'll explore the pricing. So what I'm looking for here, free tier, free tier, free tier. The free tier is currently not available for serverless accounts. I think, what do they mean by serverless accounts? Sometimes with GC, like with so the concept of serverless is a little bit different on Azure than it is on AWS. Sometimes serverless just means that you don't manage the server, but it's continuously running and it does have a compute layer. And so with AWS or in GCP, serverless means like it scales to 0. So when not in use, it doesn't cost any money. And so Azure doesn't always use that strict definition. Okay. So it says free tier with shared throughput database. So to make sense of this, I'm just going to quickly go through the UI and just kind of remind myself how the pricing works. Sometimes that helps. If you forget, you can just go over there and check. So we'll go here and we'll just create a resource and just make sure we have a clear understanding of it. So we have DB for NoSQL and DB with MongoDB compatibility. We'll go ahead and hit create here. One thing I didn't represent in these architectural diagrams are resource groups. resource groups, accounts, and GCP projects, that probably wouldn't have been a bad idea to include as well, because then you could see the scope of things. But I just forgot to do it. So down below here, okay. So provision, throughput, and serverless. So request units per second, RUs, are pre-configured, billed hourly, and guaranteed throughput with 2 models, autoscale and with the range manual. Ideal for intermediate or unpredictable traffic, billed only for consumed RUs, scaling, and demand. So serverless does mean what it means. It scales down. But provision throughput means have a guaranteed amount of provision throughput. Okay. So which is our free tier and what did I use? Uh-oh. Let's go take a look here and see what is in our doc. So I say global document DB standard. That doesn't tell me if it's provisioned or if it's serverless. Let's go over. We haven't really been doing this because so far I've been pretty good about what I've been building, but let's double check and make sure what it is that we are utilizing. We'll go over to Azure. We'll go into, you'll find about this soon enough, our DB Bicep. And so what I'm trying to look here and determine, so what does that mean? Standard. Okay. Maybe there's only one. Sometimes you have this in providers where they'll have an option for like to suggest there's other options, and then there's only one option because they never end up adding more. But it says free tier with shared throughput database. Okay, so when using the free tier, you can provision a shared database with up to 1,000 RUs for free. So we'll go over to here. Provision throughput. Only with, so this has to be provision free. So we'll say here. I'm going to assume that's on a monthly. I could be wrong. That's where we might have to look that up. I'm going to take a guess and say monthly. So we say Service CosmoDB has a free grant like Azure Functions, and also has a free for provision throughput through 2 different things. Gotcha. Okay, so that makes sense. But what did I choose is the question for our configuration. So we need to figure that out and just make sure. So we have global document DB kind. Free tier enabled right here. Okay, so then if it's enabled, then it must be using provision throughput. So I'm going to go back to my diagram. I mean, of course, I would try to make it, you know, the cost-effective one, but I can't remember everything. It's impossible. Okay, so this is definitely using provision throughput, and that's very important here. So that answers that question. That's going to be free. No problems here. So I think we have that. And the thing that we didn't use is Azure Front Door. It's too expensive. We looked at App Gateway. That's too expensive. And so we are not using anything in front of this stuff. Ideally, you'd want to have something in front of it, but that's just not going to happen here, folks. Going to just double check our time here, 1:48. We're still good for time. In fact, I believe we're going to make it to the end here. We're going to be in good shape, folks. So we'll go over to here into GCP. And you can see I have some beautiful diagramming here. There wasn't much to do for GCP, unfortunately. But maybe we'll enrich these in a moment. But we should probably add a bit more for Cloud Run. So Azure Functions, or sorry, Google Cloud Functions used to be its own service. Then they had Google Cloud Run, which is for running containers. And now Google Functions should only run on Google Cloud Run as version 2. The old ones are still around for legacy customers, but I don't think you can even launch them if you want to. And so we want to use Google Cloud Run Functions. Okay, so we'll go here and type in Google Cloud Run Functions. It's going to be a little bit confusing because of that merge there. Basically, AWS does something similar, but we don't really know if it uses Fargate or something underneath. But for GCP, it feels like a separate thing. So we'll go over to here. See, there's the first generation ones. We're not even going to touch those. We're not using those. And so we're looking here. It's based on CPU and RAM and a combination of it. And so notice that we have based on that combination, CPU and RAM, right? Okay. And so it's going to fall into the free tier. We are using free tier for this. Yes, Fargate is ECS. That is true. But the marketing team would like you to think that it's a separate thing. That's true. So we want to say for GCP here that we are definitely using. So Google Cloud Run Functions is version 2. The fact that we say Google Cloud Run Functions makes it version 2. We'll say Google Cloud Run's version 2 here. This will be $0. We have this information here. Here, I'm just copying and pasting off screen here. I'll just copy it separate like this here. By the way, this this chart here, this will get uploaded. Like this Excel sheet, you'll get access to it. I'm going to save it just so I don't lose it. We've been working this entire time. I haven't saved it once. My computer could crash here. I could just close it out by accident. I'm just going to save it to my desktop really quickly here. Or in my docs. So we'll just say pricing. And so that answers our question there. The other thing is Firestore is our storage, I believe. Firestore, yeah, we use Firestore. So we can go over to Firestore. I'm pretty sure that's free tier as well. Firestore is a, I believe, MongoDB compatible database. And here, exactly one free database. Yeah, and so I'm very certain that it is free. So Firestore, 0 data. So we've basically done our due diligence for pricing. You should be safe for pricing. For those that are doing Azure that aren't familiar with Azure, when I do the Azure front door stuff, do not do it. Just watch it. We will eventually switch over to Cloudflare, or you can just skip the videos, but you're going to lose some learning there because we do configure stuff there. And so we've figured our stuff out. We are at 1:52. We are done. I want to go inside and eat something because at 2 p.m. here, we will have our after-class Q&A. So please join us in the Discord in the after-class Q&A. Do some behind the scenes, some interactions with you folks here. And I got to get Bako out of the VR. Yeah, he needs to build that new shed. I'm not sure if, did I share that with folks here the other day, that our shed, I think I did on Facebook, or sorry, not Facebook, Twitter. If you go to my Twitter here, there was a big storm the other day. So I was showing, like, if you wait a few days, you're supposed to shovel either right away or you're supposed to shovel when the snow starts to clump. And so I'm moving snow around. And if you notice here, we had a big snowstorm and it took the shed from the back of the church and just picked it up into the lot. And it all fell apart. So Bako had to spend time cleaning that up the other day. But luckily it didn't hit anybody. So yeah, we're down the shed, unfortunately. But thanks, folks, for joining us here on the live stream. I'm going to see folks here in the after class.
Hey, this is Andrew Brown. Hey, this is Andrew Brown.
The end theme song here a little bit too soon, Bako. But I'm going to say goodbye to everyone here and see you soon, okay? Ciao, ciao.
Bootcamp. I'm free. Bootcamp.
Not a free bootcamp.
Bootcamp. I'm free. Automate bootcamp.